I left Serbia on the night train. It was great. I met a girl there from Brazil who was studying in Serbia, so that seemed strange. I got on the train, and it was fantastic. It was nicer than my hotel had been. When I woke up in the morning, I had this little feeling that maybe I was getting, sick. And I found myself in Austria. When I got off the train, I thought, oh no, it's for sure I'm going to get the flu. I felt sweaty and ill, and I had only had the flu maybe, 2 or 3 years before that, so I was very aware of the symptoms. I thought I better get a hotel and go to bed. But I found that the people in the Austrian Vienna train station were so unhelpful that I actually told one of them that because of his long hair and ponytail, I'd like to punch him. Then I got on the next train to Frankfurt. And on that train, the symptoms grew and grew. During the trip, I heard over the PA system the girl say, if you have any problems or anything that you'd like us to help you with, please don't hesitate to ask. So I thought, well, I'll go ask her about, a medical center and go see a nurse when I get off the train. So I go and I ask her, is there a medical center in the train station in Frankfurt? And she says to me, why? And I say, well, because I'm not feeling well. Next thing I know, someone comes up behind me in my chair and touches me on the head. And I turn around, and that woman is standing there with a guy, and she says to me, oh, he's a retired doctor. And I say, and he says, you're not sick. And I say, really? Well, tell him to fuck off. And then a woman comes up and says, I'm actually a real doctor, and what's the problem? So I told her, how I was feeling and about the medical center and everything like that. I said to her, I thought I'd get a couple of aspirins and talk to a nurse and then, go lie down in a hotel for a couple of days. Doesn't that sound like a good decision to you? And she says, yes, of course. So the next thing I know, we get to Frankfurt. I still know nothing about the medical center, but the woman from the train has come back and said to me that I will take you to the medical center when we get off. So I think, great. And then when the train stops, a guy shows up and says to me, I'll take your bags. And I say to him, no, you fucking won't. I'll take them myself. As I go to get off the train, I hear someone screaming in German, no, not there, here. And as I leave the train, I am surrounded by ambulance men on high alert. And they are saying to me, quick, take your coat off, take your coat off. I say to them, I won't. And they say, well, why not? And I say, well, because it's February, it's raining, and I'm outside. So now what we've got is a scene where the ambulance men are trying to take the coat off of the crazy man, and everyone in Germany is circling around to watch. Finally, we agree that I'm willing to take my coat off in the ambulance. So we walk to the end of the station where the ambulance is. We get in. They strap a bunch of equipment to me, and after a few minutes, one of them comes over and quietly says to me, sir, we think you're having a heart attack. And I say to him, I am not having a heart attack. I've got the flu, and I'm really nervous. Well, they are now under obligation, a statutory one at that, and they take me with the sirens screaming to the emergency room at some distant hospital. We get in, everyone runs, all the emergency staff run up, and I'm lying flat on a stretcher with a great big knapsack on top of me, well, two great big ones. And a guy comes over and says to me, what's the matter? And I say, but I think I got the flu. And everyone just stops, and they're like, well, why are you here? And I say, you know what? I'm strapped to a fucking, what do you call it, gurney. My choices are limited. The guy says to me, so, normally when people are have the flu, they just take a couple of aspirins and go to bed. And I think, right, great, okay. Now I'm in a room, and I'm waiting for the doctor. I have got intravenous plugged into both of my arms, and I fall asleep. A guy comes in the room and says to me, "So, what are you going to do?" And I say to him, "And what does that mean?" And he says to me, "Well, really, normally when people have the flu, they go home and just take some aspirins." And I go, "Oh, do they now?" A little while later, he comes in the room and he says to me, "So, what are you going to do?" And I say to him, "I think I'm going to kill the next person who says to me, 'So, what are you going to do?'" Later on, the doctor arrives and she calls in the ambulance men and absolutely reams them out for having totally misdiagnosed me. And now I don't know where I am. I don't know what time it is. I haven't eaten since I don't remember when. And it's late at night. And I say, what am I supposed to do? So the guy who wants to know what I'm going to do next comes in and tells me that the hospital is not a hotel. And I say, really? What's that great big green sign say then? And he says to me, "It says emergency." And I go, oh, because, I knew that. Anyway, they agree that they're going to have to keep me because I don't have anywhere to go. So a girl shows up with a wheelchair, and I say to her, "Where are we going?" And she says, "Station." And I'm like, "Oh, no, we're not. You're not taking me to the train station at 1 o'clock in the morning." And anyways, she wheels me, and then the next thing I know, I'm put into a room with people who are so sick that it's just unbelievable. One guy is choking, so they have to constantly clear his throat. Another one is so yellow that it's hard to believe he's alive, except for the gigantic bag of shit that he is constantly creating. And then there's me, and I'm begging the nurses to feed me. And anyway, at some point I wake up, and there's a doctor, and he says to me, normally when people have the flu, they just go home and take some aspirins. And then he says, we haven't even treated you. And I say, do you think that I'm not aware of any of these things? And, a woman comes in and asks me for my address. I tell her I don't have an address because of the situation I'm in and try to roughly explain it. But she's not interested. She wants an address. So I just make one up. And then I say to her, she says to me, "What do you do, just travel around?" And I say, "Yeah, that's exactly what I do. I just travel around on the train." And I whisper to her, and if I don't have any money for a hotel, I just pretend I'm sick, and then I go to the hospital. And she just fucking Germans have no sense of humor. She has no idea that I'm joking. And she leaves immediately. And then I think, well, I'm leaving too. So I go out to tell the nurse, obviously nobody cares, I'm leaving. And they tell me, "Oh, no, you can't leave." And I say to them, "Oh, but I fucking can." And they say, "No, you really literally cannot." And I say to them, "Well, then let's change I am. And I go back to the room and I yank those intravenous's out of my arm, which causes copious bleeding on my left arm. I wrap that up. I try to comb my hair, hopelessly. And then I just pack my bags and start to walk out. And they literally block the doors physically from me. And they're trying to get me to sign a release form, and it's written in German. So I say to them, "I'm not leaving it." And they're saying, "Well, then we're not going to let you leave." And I say, "You do realize, of course, tiny women like you, I would move you with no problem whatsoever." And then I think, fuck, I'll just sign this thing. So I sign it, Mickey Mouse. And I walk out the door. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's pouring rain. I am starving. I am lost. And I am living a perfect example of the official adventures of me.